Hi everybody, welcome to Honda Trail 90 Fix-Up Project Part 3. In the last installment we started taking apart the Trail 90 engine, and I discovered that leaving an engine in a pasture for 25 years to collect rainwater is not the best thing for the overall health of the motor. Specifically, the engine, which you can see here on the work table, has a piston that is seized in the cylinder and a cylinder head which has valves that are totally immovable. I cannot make the intake or exhaust valves move. What I've done since the last update is let the cylinder and the cylinder head soak in some penetrating oil overnight. I oriented the engine in a vertical position so that I could just spray the penetrating oil right here and hopefully it would seep down between the piston and the cylinder. And for the cylinder head, I have a little bath of penetrating oil down here that will hopefully loosen up this intake valve, and I've been also spraying the penetrating oil up here around the exhaust valve. I'm really excited for a couple of reasons today. The first thing I'm excited about is the prospect of hopefully freeing this engine from its frozen state. The other thing I'm very excited about is the fact that I have come up with a name for our wonderful Trail 90. It's only fitting, and it's evidence of the youngsters I have running around the house. Because of the frozen state of the engine, I'm going to call our trusty steed Elsa. So let's get started and see if we can unstick this sticky engine. The first thing I'm going to try my hand at unsticking is this intake valve on the cylinder head. I've removed the valve springs, and you can see the top of the valve stem right here. To help me loosen up this intake valve, I've grabbed a piece of scrap brass. I really don't know what the origin of it is, but the most important thing about it is that it is brass. I found it in my scrap brass bucket, which, lucky for me, hasn't found its way to the scrap yard yet. I'm getting a little bit of a collection here. I think that's about $20 worth of brass. Maybe I'll use that money for some piston rings or maybe some handlebar streamers. Give Elsa some character that way. So what I'll do is put this little piece of brass right here on top of the valve stem. It's important to use brass, I think, because it's softer than this steel and it won't hurt the valve stem. I'm just going to very lightly tap this because I don't want to bend it either, and look at the other side and see if we have any movement. I don't think we do. Try this again. Nothing yet. I feel it moving. Yep. And if you look right here, I've broken the intake valve free. Hopefully I haven't broken anything. I have never before run into this situation where the valves were stuck. I've dealt with lots of engines whose pistons were seized in the cylinders, but never a valve. Okay, I'm thinking I might want to tap it a little bit from this side next. Kind of work it back and forth and back and forth. Give it the idea of what's going to happen. I don't want this to be too much of a shock for the old girl, so I'll tap this back in a little bit, tap it back out, and try to work this valve free. And for this task, I'm going to employ another piece of brass that I found. It's got a nice tapered end that will fit nicely in here. I definitely don't want to bang on the valve too much and cause it to not seat properly into the head. So that fits really nicely there. Okay, that valve is back where it belongs. Now let's go back from the other side. And there it is. I'll work on this a little bit more and I should have it free fairly soon. I'm making some progress here, folks. I have an old sink drain actuator rod made of brass, and I've successfully pressed the valve past the top of this valve guide. This rod is just a little bit smaller than the diameter of that valve stem, so I can just nestle it in there like this and very easily tap that valve out the other side. Success! And there is the intake valve, full of crusty old yuck, but it should clean up really nicely. At least I hope it does. Well, luck has been on my side, and the exhaust valve has been much more compliant. I've still had to use some force to remove it from the cylinder head, but it hasn't been quite the ordeal that the intake valve was. And it's about to come free. And that just about does it for taking apart the cylinder head. I think I'll take a crack at the piston next. This piston is just about at top dead center, so I will put a socket wrench on this flywheel bolt and put some steady pressure on it with this hand. And with the other hand, I'll use the end of a hammer and maybe we can break it free. Well, that's not working. It's moving. After quite a lot of banging, I've almost got the piston to bottom dead center, and surprisingly, the cylinder walls look pretty good, with the exception of this upper portion here where water was allowed to seep in. So I'll continue trying to work that piston free from the cylinder, and hopefully we'll be able to salvage some of these top end parts. I've moved the piston to the bottom of the cylinder, and to remove the cylinder the rest of the way, I've rotated the crankshaft to top dead center and inserted these pieces of aluminum on each side of the cylinder so that I can tap the piston out the rest of the way. I had to be really careful that the pieces of aluminum would support the cylinder without obstructing the movement of the piston as it goes down. Here she comes. That's a pretty rotten looking piston. That one hasn't seen much love lately. Now that the top end is removed from the engine, I can get a good look at the crankshaft, which looks to be in really good shape, which is giving me motivation to continue this affair. The bearing feels smooth. There's a little bit of side-to-side movement, but not much at all, especially when you consider this is a 50-year-old machine that has been neglected for the past 25 years. There is no up and down play in the rod bearing, which is what you always want to watch out for. And the wrist pin looks like it has been saved from the ravages of time as well. Well, after quite a bit of pounding on things that really shouldn't be pounded on, what do I have to show for it? I have a rusty intake and exhaust valve, a pretty rough looking cylinder head, a cylinder which actually looks pretty good, I think I can use that, and a piston with a rusty top. It's got a red top. We'll call it a ginger. This is a red-headed piston. So the next thing we need to do is clean everything up and see what's trash and what's usable. Thanks for watching.